On March 14th, 2019, at 11:47 p.m., Rebecca Hollis called the Portland Police Department from her apartment at 2847 Ashwood Terrace. The call lasted 9 minutes and 43 seconds. In that recording, which was later sealed by court order, Rebecca can be heard screaming about a voice, a small voice, a child's voice coming from somewhere in her bedroom. Officers arrived 14 minutes later to find her kitchen floor covered in broken glass, every mirror in the apartment shattered. Rebecca was found in the corner of her bedroom closet, her hands pressed so hard against her ears that her fingernails had drawn blood. She was whispering the same sentence over and over. "I never told anyone. I never told anyone. I never told anyone." When paramedics finally pulled her hands away from her head, they noticed something clutched in her right fist. A single porcelain finger, broken clean off at the knuckle. Rebecca had inherited the doll 3 weeks earlier from her grandmother's estate in Salem, Massachusetts. Her grandmother, Eleanor Voss, had died alone in her colonial-era house on February 20th, 2019. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, though the coroner noted unusual findings in his private notes. Eleanor's eyes were open when they found her, wide open, staring at the antique wardrobe in the corner of her bedroom. The doll had been inside that wardrobe, wrapped in yellowed newspaper from 1952. When Rebecca opened the shipping box in her Portland apartment, she noticed the smell first: old fabric, dust, and something else. Something like copper, like old blood dried into cloth. The doll was approximately 16 inches tall, with a porcelain face painted in the style of early Victorian craftsmanship. Its glass eyes were an unsettling shade of grey-blue, and its dress, though faded, had once been an elegant burgundy velvet. The hair was real human hair, dark brown and surprisingly soft despite its age. Rebecca placed it on her bedroom dresser facing the wall. She wasn't sure why she positioned it that way. Even then, she didn't want it watching her. That first night, she woke at 3:17 a.m. The apartment was silent except for the hum of her refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of traffic on the street below. But there was something else. A sound so faint, she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. Breathing, small, shallow breaths, like a child sleeping. On the fourth night, Rebecca heard the voice for the first time. She had fallen asleep reading, her lamp still on, her book open across her chest. The sound of her name pulled her from sleep. Rebecca. Soft, almost tender. The voice of a little girl, no older than 6 or 7. Rebecca sat up slowly, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. The apartment was empty. She lived alone, had lived alone for 2 years, ever since the divorce. She turned her head toward the dresser. The doll was no longer facing the wall. Its head had rotated. Now those grey-blue glass eyes stared directly at her bed. Rebecca's mouth went dry. She knew she had placed it facing away. She was certain. She forced herself to stand, to cross the room, her legs weak and unsteady. When she reached the dresser, she grabbed the doll and turned it back toward the wall, her hands trembling. The porcelain felt warm, not room temperature, warm, like skin. She pulled her hand back as if burned. That night, she slept with her bathroom light on. The next morning, she tried to convince herself she'd been half asleep, confused, dreaming. But when she entered her bedroom after work the following evening, the doll had turned around again, this time. Rebecca picked it up and carried it to her closet. Placing it on the top shelf behind a stack of sweaters, facing the back wall, she closed the closet door and tried to forget about it. At 2:43 a.m., she woke to the sound of her closet door creaking open. And then the voice came again, clearer this time, closer. You left him there, Rebecca. You left him in the water. And you never told anyone. Rebecca's entire body went rigid. The memory crashed over her like ice water. She was 9 years old. Summer camp. Lake Wendell in upstate New York, 1996. There had been a boy, Tommy Ferraro. He couldn't swim well. He'd followed her away from the group, down to the restricted part of the lake where the old dock had collapsed years before. He wanted to impress her. He waded out too far. She remembered his face when he realized he was in trouble. The panic in his eyes. She remembered freezing, watching, then turning and running back to the main beach. She told herself someone else would help him, someone better, someone braver. By the time the counselors found Tommy, 23 minutes had passed. He survived, but he was never the same. Brain damage from oxygen deprivation. Rebecca never told anyone she'd been there. She'd buried it so deep, she sometimes managed to forget for months at a time. But now, in the darkness of her bedroom, that small voice had pulled it up from the depths. How could you know that? Rebecca whispered into the darkness. Silence. Then from inside the closet, that terrible childlike voice again. I know everything you've hidden, Rebecca. Everything you've done. Everything you are. Rebecca didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat with her back against her bedroom door, watching the closet, waiting for dawn. When morning finally came, she called in sick to work. She spent an hour researching the doll online, trying to find any information about its origin. She found nothing definite, but she discovered forums. Other people, other stories, dolls that moved, dolls that spoke, and always they knew things, impossible things, things that had never been spoken aloud. Rebecca decided to get rid of the doll. She took it from the closet, carried it to her car, and drove to a dumpster behind a shopping center 3 miles from her apartment. She threw it in and drove away, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. For 2 days, she felt lighter, free. She slept through the night for the first time in a week, but on the third morning, she found it sitting on her kitchen table. The doll, the same doll. Its dress slightly dirtier, a small tear in the fabric near the hem, but unmistakably the same. Rebecca backed away until her spine hit the refrigerator. This wasn't possible. She had thrown it away. She had watched it disappear into the garbage. Unless someone had retrieved it. Unless someone was doing this to her, tormenting her. But even as she tried to rationalize it, the doll's head tilted slowly to one side, not falling, tilting deliberately, and the voice came again, in full daylight this time. Tell me about the baby, Rebecca. Tell me about the choice you made when you were 19. Rebecca's knees buckled. She slid down to the kitchen floor, her vision blurring with tears. That secret was deeper than the lake. That secret had never been written down, never been spoken to a therapist, never been confessed to a priest. She had driven alone to a clinic in Seattle. She had used a fake name. She had paid in cash. And she had never told her ex-husband. Never told anyone. The doll's voice continued, soft and relentless. You think about her sometimes. You wonder if it was a girl. You've named her in your mind, haven't you? Sarah. You call her Sarah when you're alone. That night, Rebecca tried to destroy the doll. She took a hammer from her toolbox and brought it down on the porcelain face with all her strength. The face cracked, the left eye shattered. But when she lifted the hammer for another strike, she heard laughing, a child's laughter, and her hammer hand froze in midair, held by something she couldn't see, couldn't fight. The hammer fell from her grip. The cracks in the doll's face slowly sealed themselves. The shattered eye reconstructed. In 30 seconds, it was pristine again. For the next week, the doll whispered to Rebecca every night. It told her about the money she'd stolen from her mother's purse when she was 14, about the friend she'd betrayed in college, about the lies she'd told her ex-husband, about where she was going, who she was seeing. It recited her browser history, her secret searches, her shameful curiosities. It described her dreams. Dreams she barely remembered herself, dreams of violence and desire she would never admit to anyone. Rebecca stopped going to work. She stopped answering her phone. She covered every mirror in the apartment because she couldn't stand to see her own face. She looked hollow, haunted. She had lost 11 pounds in 2 weeks. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes like bruises. She tried to give the doll away, leaving it on a bench in a park. It was back on her pillow when she returned home. She tried to burn it in her bathtub. The porcelain wouldn't blacken, the fabric wouldn't catch. She tried to bury it in the woods outside the city. She dug a hole 3 feet deep, placed the doll inside and covered it with earth and stones. When she got home, it was sitting in her car's passenger seat. By the night of March 14th, Rebecca had stopped sleeping entirely. She had begun to hallucinate from exhaustion. The walls seemed to breathe. Shadows moved independently of their sources, and the doll was everywhere, on her dresser, in her closet, on the kitchen counter, in the shower, watching, always watching. That night, at 11:34 p.m., the doll spoke its longest sentence yet. "There's one more secret, Rebecca. The one you don't even admit to yourself. The real reason you left him in the water. You wanted Tommy to drown. You wanted to watch him die." Rebecca screamed, and she kept screaming. She grabbed a kitchen knife and began smashing every mirror in her apartment, trying to destroy her reflection, trying to kill the truth in her own eyes. When she finally collapsed in her bedroom closet, pressing her hands over her ears to block out that terrible voice, she felt something in the darkness with her. Small fingers, cold porcelain fingers, touching her face, and the voice whispered directly into her ear. "I'll never leave you, Rebecca. I am everything you've hidden. I am everything you truly are." Rebecca Hollis was released from psychiatric care on June 2nd, 2019. She now lives in a supervised facility in Eugene, Oregon. She doesn't speak much anymore, but the staff have reported something unusual. Sometimes, late at night, they hear her talking in her room, having a conversation, speaking to someone who isn't there. And occasionally, they hear another voice responding. A small voice, a child's voice. The doll was never found at her apartment. Police searched every room. It had simply vanished. But 3 months ago, an antique shop in Bend, Oregon, posted a photograph on their social media. An estate sale find, they called it. A beautiful Victorian doll with grey-blue eyes and dark brown hair. Real human hair. The post has since been deleted. The shop won't say why. But someone bought that doll. Someone took it home. And somewhere tonight, that person is hearing their name whispered in the darkness. What secrets are you keeping? What would you do if something knew them all?